Namo tassa. I would like to touch on the notion of middle path, as many people mention that to me in the context or the way that suits them, actually. Even in Buddhist culture, people who are supposed to know enough about Dhamma or understand it, but there is definitely a misconception, which is not surprising because ultimately most people live by the kilesa and the moha or avijja, and they like to interpret things the way that actually suits them, instead of maybe understanding properly the original meaning. And basically, I'm referring to those simple words, expressions that many people say when we talk about middle path, or ultimately, as many consider me a bit too extreme on the path of Dhamma, which is not surprising again, because if you want to reach the highest level, you have to be really serious and focused and dedicated, which seems to be too extreme for most people who just want to enjoy a regular life, even if they pretend to be Buddhist or to care about Dhamma. So many times, basically, some people would say, yes, but life is about the middle path, right? Like the Buddha teach about the middle path, so it cannot be perfect, so a little bit of good and a little bit of bad. But that is exactly not the right understanding of the notion of middle path. But that, of course, suits the ego, atta, of most people, because that ego, as such, usually likes to think it knows better and doesn't really like to be wrong. So this way of talking about the middle path is what suits, yes, a normal life, but that's not the meaning from the Buddha originally. And again, we go back to the kilesa, the defilements of the mind that controls most humans. And it's about the moha, lobha, dosa, so the delusion, the greed, and the hatred. So the good and the bad, what people mean is that if they do a little bad, it's not so bad. But again, if you do something bad, it is bad. Whether it is a little bit or a lot, it's still in that direction. And then they say there's nothing wrong about enjoying the pleasures of life, the entertainment, the distraction, because it's the good part of life, it's what makes them happy. But then, same thing. Actually, what you do with that, first of all, is somewhat half-consciously not care about the proper teaching of the Buddha, the proper meaning of the middle path in Dhamma. And then, by trying to justify to be okay to do some bad and actually to have the addiction to the good, like the pleasure of life, the leisure, and what you think makes you happy, all of that actually will contribute to create worse karma in the future anyway. And so with that, you will get more suffering. Exactly because of that ego-based attitude that thinks it knows better what the Buddha meant, and because of the facts of thinking that it's okay to do some little bad, not the proper thing, not following the morality um, exactly, and on the other hand, that it's okay to enjoy life through your addictive pleasures or leisures. But anyway, that is the wrong interpretation, and all of that, will just keep making you getting worse karma and more suffering in life, actually, because it is typical of that mindset and the ego that likes to justify its ways. On the other hand, what actually the Buddha meant and what is the true middle path is indeed, like some people say, it cannot be too extreme, not one extreme or the other. But basically the main word is exactly that key secret that leads one to enlightenment, to the Nibbana at the end, which is Upekkha again, equanimity. And Upekkha is exactly the meaning of what is the middle path, because it means to keep a very balanced mind. So as the picture of the original balance is, back in the days, the mind is centered and balanced like this, not going this way, not going this way. And if you have Upekkha, equanimity, with awareness, Sati, always Sati, of course, Sati and Upekkha is what will get you to Nibbana, to enlightenment, with a very, very balanced, strong, steady mind. And that exactly means not to yield to the weaknesses of the mind, the defilement of the mind, to either indulge in the pleasures of life and leisure because you think that's what makes you happy, but it's an addiction, and then you think it's okay because it's the good side of life, or then the aversion towards what you consider negative and what you consider painful, either physically or mentally. But again, exactly because you have one side and you try to justify one side is what creates the other side. And that's the basic of the First Noble Truth in Buddhism about the statement about suffering. What is the suffering in life and where does it come from? Exactly by developing an addiction to get your monkey mind entertained, distracted, pleasured, then you create the counterbalance on the other side. And that's why you will ask for suffering one way or the other, psychologically or physically. And then you will hate that, of course. Dosa, Lobha, dosa, everything always based on moha or avijja, ignorance, delusion of the mind. But the proper middle path is exactly bringing back to a centered mind, balanced mind, not reacting and not craving. And that's, of course, through the deeper practice, regular practice, that one will get there. Again, it's not that easy, just like most people would like it to, exactly because most people have the weak mind through moha, lobha, dosa, and that's why they go this way or this way. But as we know, the proper practice of Dhamma is quite a serious path to be very diligent and seriously practiced regularly, all the way. And that's why you will get really, at the end, centered on the middle path and not like a weak mind getting so controlled and distracted one way or the other. So that is the true meaning of the middle path, really. It's not just what suits one with the classic mind defilements of the kilesas, of course, because the Buddha has always taught to try to get rid of the kilesas and focus on the other side, the four Brahma Viharas. But for that, again, as we know, the four Brahma Viharas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, that requires selflessness, so no ego, not thinking about one's own interest or one's own emotions. And that is again with Upekkha. And Upekkha, of course, equanimity is the centered, balanced mind. And that is right there in the middle, the true middle path that can lead to Nibbana.